What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Mayrand podcast. Today, my guest is Scott Reeves. Scott is an entrepreneur from Quebec with a big passion for action sports. He is the owner and co founder of Access Boardshop. After many years of working in a shop while completing an engineering degree, Scott teamed up with two friends to start Access Boardshop in 2002. What started out of a passion for action sports turned into an immediate success. Access quickly became a staple in the Quebec action sports scene with their deep involvement in the freeskiing, snowboarding, and skateboarding scene. After a decade in business, Access had a total of 9 shops open in the province of Quebec before going back to only one physical location in the mid 2010s. Access is now over 20 years old and is still going strong in Saint-Sauveur. In this episode, we talked about a bunch of stuff: Scott's entrepreneurship story, opening a board shop in the early 2000s, the challenges of handling rapid growth in a business, the importance of giving back to the community, and much, much more. Shout out to the patrons on Patreon: Will Cameron, Raph Diaz, Laurent Olivier Martin, Holden Baldassi, Ryan Bruninghouse, Sam Chef, Nick Gosselin, and Wyatt Loney. Thanks to the sponsors: Planks Clothing, Dickens Restaurants, and Access Board Shop. Let's go. Mr. Scott Reeves, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Xavier, thanks for having me on this.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked to have you. A legend, local legend that people might not necessarily know, but I think a lot of people know Access Board Shop.
Hopefully they do. I don't know.
I'm stoked to have you because we've had episodes with skiers that are young and some older. I've had episodes with photographers, photogs, with filmmakers, and I think it was a really good idea. You've been a sponsor of the podcast since the beginning, and thank you for that. But I just want to mention that you didn't ask to come on. I actually asked you to come on because I think you have a really interesting story. And I think this is going to be a great episode to talk maybe about the culture of the sport, but from a business perspective, maybe because you're a passionate guy. You're not a skier, you're a snowboarder, but still you're in the snow sport community that we all love, and you've been running your shop for now over 20 years, right?
That's right. Yeah, we clocked 20 this October, so yeah, on the
Going
20th
on
right now.
21.
Going on 21. Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack before we go into running a shop, running a ski shop. I think it's something that everyone can relate because I think every town that has skiing has a ski shop. It's probably one of the most common businesses for skiing and snowboarding worldwide. Um, and I think it's cool to get that story because I had never asked you and we never talked about it. So I'm gonna have the firsthand experience of learning also. Tell me about young Scott. Like, you're from uh, Saint-Sauveur, the Saint-Sauveur area near Montreal. Tell me about how young Scott got into the snow sports life.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that I'm a snowboarder, but I have to admit, and I think a lot of people know this, but I did have to go through the skiing first because back in the days, back in back in the early 80s, I mean, there wasn't much snowboarding going on, and my father wasn't really, or my family wasn't into snowboarding, or the start of the snowboarding, with Jake Burton, the rest of the queue. So yeah, no, I started ski racing when I was, well, not racing when I was 2, but I started skiing when I was 2, and then raced all my way up till 9. And that's where yeah, 9, 10, that's where I switched to snowboarding, because there wasn't much freestyle in skiing yet. I mean, I think it was just starting. I think maybe I would see Dorion, Cusson, and I didn't really know Paris at the time, but I'd see them in the moguls, and that would be the freestyle part of the skiing. But it was still pretty much structured and pretty much the same as the racing side, where it was maybe more rigid than what freestyle is supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I got out of there, jumped out, and then fell in love with the snowboarding and the snowboard culture.
Yeah. I'm maybe 10 years younger than you. And I had the same thing when I was a kid around the early 2000s. I had a season where before I got into free skiing, where I tried snowboarding because it was what felt more freestyle than the racing vibe, let's say.
Yep.
And so you never had the gist to get back into skiing. Once you were on that, you were hooked.
I think we had some bets going. I went back maybe for one day in 2010 or something, and I'm willing to do it again. I mean, I'm not going to go back to skiing obviously because I love being sideways. Like I surf, I try to skate, I try to surf. I'm not a you know I like being sideways, but yeah, well, for sure, I'll
Was something that felt more natural to you?
not necessarily because I mean no, this is a good question, but no, I just like the feeling of being sideways, but honestly, it's not that it's the same thing, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. I mean, a good powder turn on a pair of skis or snowboard is a good powder turn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Or a good, nice airtime is whatever. You're floating in the air.
Yeah, you see that sometimes when there's some pro skiers or pro snowboarder that switch sport for a day, and it's almost as if they can do the same tricks on
First,
them.
good.
There's a there's a video of Burke Rude, who's like the top skier right now in the world. He's winning every slopestyle comp, and there's a side by side shot of him doing a dub, I think dub 14 maybe on skis, and also on a snowboard. And it's the same day. He just switched from
No
board to
way.
skis. Yeah,
There's two people that come to mind up north. There's Mad Mode, Raymond.
yeah,
She can carve a snowboard like better than most people can snowboarding, right? So she's really good on this. So she can switch back and forth to carving skis or snowboard. There's Tom Galarno, a local, almost, he's local pro, local hero, and he switches too from skiing to snowboarding really easily. So yeah, let's take it. Yeah, from Saint, well, not Saint-Sauveur, but I mean, I guess people know a little more Saint-Sauveur than Saint Adèle, which is just a city beside Saint-Sauveur.
yeah.
And yeah, Laurentian region, born, raised. I mean, since day one.
I saw some videos of you once. Some '90s video of you competing in a snowboard comp. Um, and again, I'm going totally blind with that question. Was there ever some competition aspirations from you? Like, what was your snowboarding days? Maybe in your teens. Like, did you ever aspire to become a pro or anything, or it was just like some local stuff shredding around?
It's fun. Those days, I didn't aspire to be a pro. I just wanted some free shit, right? So I just wanted some free gear, and I want, like, brands to give me some free stuff. But yeah, no, I did compete like most people did, I guess, in the early days of snowboarding, and I thought I was good back then. When I look at it now, I was okay. I mean, I wasn't bad, but I wasn't nothing to make the World Cup or especially not the Olympics.
Yeah. To give people some context, nowadays, if you want some attention, there's established brands, there's established shops, there's social media, there's YouTube. What was the life of a teenager, Scott? Um, how did you get free shit back in the days? What was the life to get attention from the industry?
Yeah, that's actually an amazing question because it's different, but it's not that different from what it is right now. Because right now we're going around with phones, right, and we're filming, editing on phones or whatever. I mean, maybe people have better equipment, but basic as that. But back in those days, it was camcorders, held handheld camcorders that we'd film each other, and then we wrap up two VCRs beside each other, and then play, record, and then we would do our own montages back in the early '90s.
Really?
So things have changed, but not really.
You were just maybe it had less user friendly stuff, but you still managed to have the same end product.
I think it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. Well, so no, obviously the end product is not the same because you don't have the glitches in between the
You
shots. But
managed to came up with your edits,
yeah, 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 yeah,
like
yeah, for sure.
your season promos, or I don't know how did you call them back in the days?
I guess it wasn't as official as a season promo because we didn't even know what those were back then. We were just trying to get some footies and then it's trying to have a few laughs after a good day of riding. So
Yeah,
yeah, but no, the industry was pretty pretty free back then. It wasn't many guidelines or it was out and open. Let's say
yeah.
for the best, in my opinion. But we can touch on that later on.
Well, tell me. Uh, Maybe we'll get to compare later on with nowadays. But how was it back then?
You meaning how was the industry? You mean?
Well, yeah, yeah.
Well, like again, like I just said, I think it was more, I guess, more free, more open, more like you do what you want, and it seems like maybe now there's more maybe guideline norms, and maybe it's too structured or too, no, I wouldn't say boxed in, but almost, you know. That's what scares me a bit about our sports right now. That are getting really a little too. I don't know if the term boxed in is right, but I mean, you need to do certain things to get recognized.
I got into judging this year, and
Yeah.
last time I judged a comp was over 10 years ago, and I really got hit with a difference because it's basically all since the Olympics came in, and that all trickled down to the local comps where now you got to have accreditations and you have ski clubs, and you need to have a, there's a lot of rules that are not necessarily applied because there's still coaches that are, from our generation, but in theory, you can't throw down a trick if it's not certified. And to like, it's all things that come from mogul and aerials, I feel like. But let's say a, a coach or someone could file a complaint after a comp saying, hey, that kid didn't have the right to do his dub 10 because he doesn't have it on so anyways, there's a lot of processes that I was like, oh fuck, we're at that point now.
Well, not only that, I think, I mean, it's the sport is judged more now, and in skiing and snowboarding, pretty much the same on the difficulty and execution and everything. Where before it was all style, and we need to get back to that somehow. You know, I think this the style part of it has been forgotten, and just unfortunately it has. You know, and a lot of people, the game has changed now. You can you can have any kid practicing in any airbag, any trick, for a million times, and he can probably go to the Olympics, but that doesn't mean he can ride properly.
And now it's time for a first sponsor break. Dickens is a family owned fast food restaurant chain with 12 locations in the Montreal region. Close to 70 years after opening their first restaurant on Montreal's Boulevard Pineuf, Dickens is still focused on what matters, the same great menu with great food made with quality ingredients. I've said it, I'm a Dickens super fan, and many people ask me what's my go to. I have to say it's their famous Wally burger, a double cheeseburger with slices of pepperoni. It's so good. Dickens is now selling their sauce in their restaurants and in many Metro grocery stores throughout Quebec. Plus, they've put a bunch of great recipes to go along with it on their website at dickenssauce.com. Also, big news, their Saint Jerome location is reopened. Same location, brand new building. Go check them out when you pass by Saint Jerome. Support companies who support skiing, support Dickens restaurants. Yeah, well, I totally agree. That's something I definitely saw is as much as places like Maximize are, uh, a super great thing. Don't get me wrong; it's insane for the sport and for the kids and for local kids. But at Maximize, you get the in run for the jump, and the out run, and you repeat. So there's no point in your day or your week if you go there where you actually ride. So I saw some kids this year that in between hits in a slope style run or in a half pipe run where you were like, oh shit, you need to do more riding because I'm I'm not I'm not convinced that you know how to ride.
Well, and here's the thing: it's like I'm not taking away anything from these people because obviously they're high level athletes, right?
Yeah,
So what they're doing, I can't even imagine I could do one day. I could never do what they do, right?
yeah.
But personally, that's not what I want to see.
Hmm.
Like I flip on the X Games, I'm not sure if that's what I want. The product is not what I used, so
Yeah.
the product has changed. So I guess if the mass wants to see that, then that's fine. What do I have to say with it? But it seems that the more and more people I talk to around me, that's not necessarily what people want to see. It's just maybe a way to get get contests or whatever in a box where it's easier for the people organizing to judge, or like
Yeah,
I
to
don't know.
package
I don't
it.
know. Yeah, to package it but it's we're not
Yeah.
packageable.
But I think if you'd have to ask the a broad spectrum of people, what gets people going is when you see that technicality, but also mixed with some riding.
Yeah,
Um, there's on the snowboarding side, there's the supernatural comp. Is that the
yeah,
name?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
like you see technical stuff, but you actually can't get down to a certain hit if you don't know how to ride properly. So it like mixes the two.
Natural selection, super, yeah, natural selection, or
Natural selection, my
yes,
bad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, that's an amazing example. And I know it's harder to see, but I mean, it's harder to not to see, but it's harder to have host those kinds of contests because it's, I mean, it implicates a
Yeah.
lot of more things than just a big air or whatever.
Yeah, you need to
But
be
yeah,
in the back country. You need to have good snow conditions.
I guess no, I guess I mean they're all good. I mean, I mean everything's good for the industry. It just, I guess I wish they'd put more, place more important on style and you know, nice grabs and longer grabs.
Hmm.
Maybe that's what it's all about. Who
Yeah,
knows?
I guess I totally agree with you. My 2 cents of being on the other side this season is that the with style, the risk is getting into really a biased territory of like, you know, someone might do a trick super clean, but it's not your favorite style, and then what? How are you supposed to judge that? Are you going to be harsh to him just because you don't like his style? But
Yeah, I get that. No, I understand.
that's pretty subjective. So
Yep.
it's such a hard territory. Basically, in skiing right now, style goes under execution. So it's like part of, was your trick well done and everything, but I think style is always going to go back to maybe, less structured events and filming. Because again,
Yeah, yeah,
inside it, inside of filming, the people speak. It's like, do you enjoy that video? If people enjoy it, it's going to get a lot of views, and it's going to
yeah.
speak by itself. But yeah, it's a hard thing, man.
Yeah,
It's
so let's say, so we're going back and forth here, and you said before, like I was the first one to not the first sponsor, but I mean, I jumped on, you know, helping out this podcast. But we did business back in the days. I mean, with the ski movies, right?
yeah.
So where I want to go with this is it seems like there's more money right now in contests versus those videos, and I think those videos are really important part of our culture. And it seems now like everything is built into shorts.
Hmm.
So, you know, anything under a minute, and it's fast food, and it's consumed rapidly, but it just doesn't seem like you get into you don't seem to get into it as much as a movie like back in the days. And you know,
Hmm. Well, I'm not as much. I don't have as much knowledge of what's going on in snowboarding, to be frank. But in skiing, there's a lot of good things that are going on right now on the online free content on YouTube. Every fall, there's like dozens of great short movies. I think it's just a matter of the industry adapting to. There's been a big clash with, going from selling DVDs with ski movies 15 years ago to now, of companies adapting their marketing. Back in the days, it was like, oh, let's spend 10 grand to pay this company to make a movie, and the movie will sell worldwide. It was pretty straightforward. And now, between Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and athletes making their own content, and I think there's just a big adaptation that's still not completely done, but I think we're on the right track skiing wise, because there's insane content for kids that want to get stoked on. It's endless right now. The only thing is, how do you reassess the business model so that athletes get compensated for that? It's hard to track value these days for the athletes. That's what I find. And as a filmmaker, also, it's like we're in the sea competing with like TikTok chefs doing doing meal content, and we're in the
yeah,
you're not just competing with skiing content or snow sports content. You're competing with,
any kind of content that'll capture
yeah,
your attention. No, I get what you're saying. I guess shops could have like a more important role in this, where you know, you used to walk in a shop and there'd always be a VHS or a DVD playing of that, you know, current season's skate movie or snowboard or ski movie. And right now, it's not the case. And I've told myself that I wanted to go back there. I just need to do it. And I think it's important for the industry to do it because, like you said, I think it will put more value on it, and you know, make the wheel
yeah.
turn, like we say.
And now it's time for another sponsor break. Axis Board Shop has been dedicated to free skiing since its inception in 2002. At a time when some people and brands were still looking down on free skiing, Axis believed in it fully. After 20 years of supporting athletes, movies, competitions, events, and so much more, Axis is still going strong. Above all, Axis is a ski shop where you'll find everything you need for skiing, snowboarding, or skateboarding. Check them out in store in Saint-Sauveur or online at axisboutique.com. Support companies who support skiing. Support Axis Board Shop. we branched off, and I love that. But I also want to keep track of your story because I
Yeah,
think that
yeah, yeah.
that's really good. Um, in 2002, you started Axis Boutique, board shop, however we want to call it. What led up to that? I think, maybe I'm wrong, you have an engineering degree.
Hells yeah, dude. Yeah. Fin- Actually finished the engineering degree while I was opening up the shop in 2002. So
That
finished the engineering degree in 2003.
that's a boss move. So again, I'm gonna put in a lot of stuff. I'll let you answer how you wish. The parents' pressure, or maybe the school pressure of you've studied engineering is not an easy degree to get. It's a lot of work, and it's also a lot of great career opportunities. You can get some good money. What leads you to, at the same time of that, launching a ski shop? And not only are you launching a ski shop, you're launching it in Saint-Sauveur, where there's competition infinite.
A lot of things to talk about in that. A lot of things to talk about. First of all, I think like I've fell in love with surfing and skateboarding when I was I think 8, right? So
Yeah,
from that moment on, I was hooked on this industry. So I'll use a really very large industry of skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, surfing, and then BMX, motocross came in it at
let's
least.
say action sports culture.
I don't, yeah, let's say
Well,
action sports culture.
how would you call it?
Well, pretty much that.
Okay.
So you're right. So I fell in love with that, and so I knew, and I was an entrepreneur from like fucking day one. I used to sell, cokes and sandwiches at my father's football games to make extra money, and then pick up golf balls and sell them, and then mow lawns. And I knew I wanted to work for myself. I'd also work for other people, on a whatever lifeguarding job or whatever. But I really enjoyed being my own boss.
Yeah,
So even though I was studying to be an engineer, I think that was more like I guess, to get a degree, like a plan B. And a lot of people talk to me about schooling, and I'm like, I mean, what they teach in school a lot of times is it's pretty much bullshit, right? But you need to go through that process to learn how to learn, and that's the most important thing. So, whatever program or whatever you're in, from the hardest to the easiest, I mean, just stick with it, and that'll teach you something, and that'll teach you to be more disciplined, and to have the to the livrable. How do you say livrable?
deliverables.
Deliverables, yeah.
Yeah,
And that'll teach you a lot in life, and I guess that's why I got through the university part, because it was long. It was long and technical with that engineering. So that plan B was good.
yeah.
So if we go back to the scene back then, I mean, I was working at the local board shop, which call Performance.
You
I,
worked there. I didn't
I,
know that.
oh yeah, dude, you didn't know that?
I
Okay, so
didn't know that.
wait, was say that. Hold on here. Me and Schwinn both worked there.
Schwinn, who's also one of the co-founder of Axis.
Exactly. So me and Schwinn worked there. I'd been working there for maybe, I don't know, at least I guess 6 7 years, and Schwinn had been working there for 5 years. So we pretty much knew the local business, I'd say, and how things worked and how a shop would work. So we had some basic knowledge. And like you said before, I mean, it was a lot of competition. There was a lot of competition, maybe in terms of ski being sold, but freestyle skis being sold, there
Yeah.
were none.
Well, it still didn't existed really,
Well,
or
kind of.
it was new. It was
It
still
was
like
it was starting, right? So yeah, finishing up university, and obviously my parents have always been really supportive of anything I do. So it wasn't like a pressure to finish off school. It was more like, well, yeah, you want to start a shop? Okay, try that. And if that doesn't work, at least you have the other. So I just want to give a shout out to them for giving me that opportunity to at least have the backing, the moral backing of starting a shop. So the other missing part of that, so me and Schwinn were working at Performance, a local board shop, and then the other missing part of that people don't really know about, or some do, is Exod. I don't know if you've ever heard about that shop.
no.
So Exod was Alex Giroux, and I don't know if Liboiron was involved with him. He was involved with him, but I don't know, like financially or just helping him out finding a shop, a physical shop to sell at. But he opened up a shop for 6 months in Saint-Sauveur.
Okay.
And what he did was that Alex Giroux, he had freestyle skis, so twin tips, whatever, a little bit of mogul maybe, but he had all the snowboarding brands outerwear in his shop. So Foursquare Forum, and somehow he kind of weaseled his way in distributors, and told them he had a shop. And I'm pretty sure he didn't mention it very loudly that it was a ski shop, because let's be honest, back then it was still a big rivalry between both. So, anyways, he had skis and jackets, and he was selling in a shop in st-sauveur, but it was really, really, low volume. But when I saw that in 2000, I guess it was the winter of 2002. Yeah, because we opened in the fall of 2002. When I saw that in the winter of 2002, I was like, "Hey, what? Wait a sec. That's my dream. I want a shop. I want a brand. Why the hell is he doing it and I'm not doing it yet?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of got me fired up, and then one plus one, some things happened with my old boss at Performance, and for another business, but he kind of ticked me off in the wrong way, so it kind of gave me the opportunity, and
The tick to say "f you," I'm gonna do my own thing.
yeah, and he was really a good guy, so I kind of feel bad, because I mean, I know now from the other perspective, from the other angle, that not being a boss, you don't always want to do a bad thing. It's just sometimes there's so much stuff going on that you do make wrong decisions, bad decisions. And there was nothing personal, but I took it personal. So that's why I said, F you, I'm starting my own shop.
Yeah.
So started the shop, didn't start the shop, but kind of had the excuse to start the shop. And so went to Schwinn, which was the manager at Performance back then. I was finishing up, and then talked to Alex and said, well, okay, guys, let's do it. Ski and snowboarding hadn't been done.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the Eastern Canada, because I don't really know, the rest of the California scene, or, out west or whatever. But I'm pretty sure, like, we were one of the first shops to merge both freestyle skiing and snowboarding
Yeah.
together. And that was not received well with many people back then. I mean,
Many
from the snowboard
snowboarders, I'm
industry.
guessing.
Well,
Yeah.
well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Many snowboarders, but even like maybe more, even some skiers, snowboarders still were not accepted that well. There were still the bad boys of the industry. So
And now it's time for another sponsor break. I love Planks Clothing. I've been using their gear for 3 seasons now, and I only have great things to say. Great, stylish products that get the job done whether I'm skiing on the hill or filming street with the boys. Spring season is upon us, and Planks Clothing is here with a new streetwear drop on their website. Made from 100% organic cotton, these hoodies and t-shirts will keep you looking fresh for seasons to come. My favorite one is the smiley hoodie that I'll be rocking for sure this coming spring and summer. Check out the new streetwear drop at planksclothing.com. Support companies who support skiing. Support Planks Clothing. Tell me, where does the idea to sell skis and snowboard come from? Because like the first twin tip is the Salomon 1080, and it's 98. So going there, it's like twin tips have existed for 4 years, going on 5. As you said, there's a big beef, or like clash in the culture between snowboarding and skiing. For kids that might not be aware, for a long time in snow parks, skiing wasn't allowed. It was a snowboarding place. Um, where does it come from you to say, okay, we're going to sell both? Was it a business thing, like thinking really rationally about money? Was it a cultural thing? Because I know you're someone that likes to gather people together. You're not.
yeah, I like hearing you say that. I do believe I'd like to not gather, but I'd rather promote peace and war. So yeah, I do want to. I like, but to go back on that, it's funny now because I realize it more and more. I guess I unconsciously knew it back then, but I had a whole bunch of friends skiers, and obviously we were hardcore in the snowboard industry, right? Because you mentioned before, like, oh well, skiers weren't allowed in snow parks. Well, when I started snowboarding, I wasn't allowed on every hill. Even now, I'm not allowed on every hill in the
Mhm.
states, right? There's
Yeah,
still Alta or
I think so.
Glen, Mad River Glen, I think, doesn't allow snowboarding. Anyways, doesn't matter really. But so where I was going with this is that I had some skier friends. I was, really in the snowboard industry, the snowboard culture, let's call it, and flipping off skiers left and right, but I wouldn't flip off my friend that still he was skiing but had the same mentality as me, right? And it
Hmm.
was the same thing for my partner Schwinn, and you Alex, Alex, which was the other partner. I knew him. I'd been skiing with him, snowboarding with him, for a while, and Schwinn was really good friends with. He went to school with Cusson and Dorion, Vincent Dorion and JF Cusson, and Poirier too, I think, and Phil Poirier. So he was really close to those guys. So he saw the evolution of skiing, and he understood that evolution, and he could see like they wanted to be like us. We wanted to be like skateboarders, and it was all like intertwined. It was all linked together. And I remember Dorion used to switch from skiing to snowboarding just to go up in the snow park, and even though he wasn't allowed on skis, I mean, he'd had like a free pass sometimes to ride it on a ski, on skis, because he could, properly, rip, destroy those jumps. He could do like really cool things that even snowboarders respected. So for us, I guess it was a no brainer matching both because we knew friends that did both and had friends in the culture that did, not both, but that were skiers or were snowboarders. And so we kind of saw the opportunity there where like we're all the same. I mean, if you love this culture and you're like, it doesn't matter if you ski or snowboard, in my opinion. And then what I realize now, and that there's I think there's idiots in boat sports. There's certain people I don't want to deal with in boat sports. I'd rather deal with skiers in a certain aspect than snowboarders in certain
Yeah, it's not necessarily the sport you're doing, it's just your attitude and your way of being.
I think it is, yeah. I think it is.
I think for a lot of people, um, back in the days, they saw skiing as something cool, whereas I don't know how to phrase that. It's as if for certain people, it took longer to kind of respect that there is something cool to free skiing, and you still see some comments like X Games post something that free skiing wise, and someone says, "Oh yeah, that's whack. It looks like rollerblading." So it seems like it almost goes back to the whole rollerblading versus skateboarding beef that there was in the 90s, let's say maybe late
Yeah,
90s.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Thing is that rollerblading kind of disappeared, right?
Yeah,
I get a feeling it disappeared. Skiing never disappeared; it just grew stronger. And it's a good analogy when you talk about the X Games. I mean, you look at it. I mean, there's some snowboarders there with some whack style. Like they might be bitching about skiing that looks like rollerblading because not, in my opinion, not all skiing looks good. But same thing for snowboarding. There's some snowboarders aren't looking good at all either. So I mean, where do you go with that? That's like I said before. Like I think it depends on that person on the it depends on the rider. I mean, some rider will make it look good, some riders won't, in my opinion. But like you mentioned before, that's all about style, and it all goes to personal judgment. And I guess everybody has an opinion on that.
tell me about the process of launching it, because last you said was you were talking with Schwinn, your partner, saying "f you" to the shop you were working at. Let's launch something. So from that first gist of anger and motivation to getting to an actual shop running, tell me about getting that started.
Wow, again, a lot of things to talk about, but yeah. So I guess to start off with, as like you mentioned, that like a lot of people, it was against the grain. It wasn't that against the grain because a lot of skiers would shop at that local shop. So apart from we already had about, I don't know, a third of that market. We weren't selling the actual physical skis, but they were buying, you know, snowboard or whatever surf skate apparel. So we had that part, and then so the other thing was that we didn't find at that time, but I understand now that it's a lot of money and time and implication that previous owner, but that previous owner for Performance wasn't investing enough in the industry and giving back enough via contests or via events or via sponsorship, not money, but sponsorship, giving out gear to riders. But he was, when I come to think about it, he was doing the right thing. We were, the thing is that we were holding those events, we were organizing those events. So if we were going to do it for somebody else, why not just do them for ourselves, So anyways, we opened the shop 2002, November 22, 2002. we opened it with that mentality of giving as much back to the community as we could, local community, local culture. So skiing, snowboarding, skateboarding, the three pillars. And so we came. I think since day one, we picked up. I think Remo was on the team, and he was popping up back then, and a few more local heroes. Supporting a whole bunch of local athletes, higher level athletes. Schwinn back then was pretty good. Also, he's in local regional snowboard movies. The local crew was really involved already in that, in the local, I'd say even provincial scene. So we kind of opened up with a boom, meaning that we already had the effectives in terms of presence wise on the hills and in the local scene movies. So yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't have enough probably inventory when we opened up. Shop was half full, it didn't have, but people would buy anything that would represent us, not us, but people trying to push that, that the community, the culture.
Hmm.
So we'd have shitty t-shirts, shitty Access t-shirts and shitty joggers, to start off, because then we got better at it. But then people would just eat them up, even if it weren't the right size.
I think that's something that always stood out for me, and curious to have your explanations on that, on where it comes from. But I've seen a lot of shops in my life that sell products, sell boots or skis or whatever, and limit themselves to that. And a big part of how the Axis brand was pushed, I feel like, is you guys had almost your own clothing line. Like, you guys were producing hoodies and t-shirts and pants, and you could basically be dressed from head to toe in stylish Axis gear that evolved with like the fashion trends. So like you'd go to the hill and the local hero wasn't wearing Oakley jacket. He was repping Axis.
Yeah. Well, a few things there. First thing is that a lot of people will open a business. They'll run their business, but they won't run it as a brand. And we opened it as a brand, not as a snowboard shop.
And was that a conscious thing, or how did that come to life?
I guess we were always pushing brands, and I don't know. It's funny because it wasn't really a conscious thing. It was just more a natural thing. You open up your shop, you have the stickers of your shop. You open up your shop, you have hoodies, t-shirts, 100, basically. That's
Yeah.
always in every color, in every size and color. We got the bad end out of that, where we couldn't keep stock enough to have that. But anyways, that's another subject. So opening up a business, not a business, but a shop, but mostly a brand. And the other thing was, a lot of times it seems like I guess we were younger and more in touch with what our friends wanted and what we wanted back then. And sometimes the industry doesn't adapt as quickly to the wants and needs of those riders, those kids. And that's kind of a bit like what happened back in those days, where when the joggers, I don't know if you remember the joggers with the cargo pockets, and no other brand was doing it back then. So we said, well, it'd be cool to have a jogger, have a cargo pocket, and have it baggy and this and that. And we said, well, nobody's doing it, and we tried to do it locally, nobody would do it, so why not just make it.
Hmm.
And then boom, it took off. We had I think we were victim of the success, meaning that we couldn't keep stock on enough product.
Yeah.
It would come in, and it would sell so quickly that we'd always be out of stock in certain sizes.
Yeah.
And to touch base on that, so we were selling in every Axis shop and satellite shop, but we were also trying a distribution out in Europe
Mm.
with I have Drey in mind, but I forget what their distributor was. It was in Swiss and Switzerland. We had friends that we knew people out there, and we couldn't feed them enough product. They placed us a booking for next to the upcoming season, and we didn't have enough product to ship them, or we'd ship them like um, sizings that weren't ordered originally. So we could have had success selling it as a brand out in Europe, but we never did, because we didn't deliver. We didn't operation wise here wasn't
Couldn't
fine
keep
tuned
up.
enough. Couldn't keep up.
Right.
So we missed the boat on that. We blew it big time.
you guys were hitting the nail right on the nail. What's the expression?
Sure,
You guys
sure.
were really on point, trend wise, fashion wise, because the number of edits I saw in New Schoolers where Dom Laporte or Belmar or someone was repping the clothing, and everyone was like, "What's that? AS? That's so sick. I want that." And everyone was like, it was grabbing people's attention. Like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we miss a boat is like, I, it was pushed locally,
Hmm.
maybe too much, and it got into everybody's hand locally,
Yeah,
where you'd be riding in your car and you'd see somebody on the sidewalk repping that big logo where you're like, well, that person really shouldn't, it's not like I want my clothes on certain people, but like you don't want it on everybody. Because then once you have it on everybody, it's not exclusive anymore. Or it doesn't have it doesn't have the special,
yeah, the brand
it,
loses
it loses its
its
luster, I guess. I don't
appeal.
know. Appeal, maybe. Yeah. So we overproduced locally, underproduced internationally,
Mm.
and that whole thing kind of imploded at the same time as all the shops imploded.
Well, you're getting ahead of yourself, but that's something interesting that I want to touch on. Um, Basically, right now you're in a space where the shop is that is not the original one. When you opened in 2002, you were in a small, like I don't know how many square feet, maybe 1,000, 2,000 square feet.
1,200 square feet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Crammed in there.
small shop, but that was really core. Kids would get in, sit on the couch, watch movies. As you said, you build a hype. It was an instant success. I remember being a part of that generation. Every kid in town wanted to go there, wanted to buy there. I think my brother bought his first twin tips that were forefronts there. Like it was, you were in a good timing. Maybe I'm going to branch off on that because I think it's a good subject. Not only did you have to start a shop selling a new sport, aka free skiing, but you were also selling with new brands that were just starting off as well. Like you're a new shop starting off selling like Armada,
Yep.
that is also a new brand that has just come to life. How was that? Because nowadays and for a long time, if I think of Armada in Quebec, I think of you guys because I think you're maybe the shop that sells the most and you're associated with them. But how was it getting that relationship started when Armada was just getting started?
I think we kind of knew the brand was going to take off also because they were also doing their homework. They were also gathering the right pieces of the puzzle together, right? They had all the riders, they had the style, they had the I mean the fucking skis looked amazing, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to ride them. The skis, the quality was all right. It was good. And so yeah, we I guess like some brands obviously we tried to push back in the days never succeeded, but I think the better ones did and you know, it's good. Yeah, say I think pretty much the same as us. Maybe they were also a victim of their own success, where they didn't almost have enough product. We would be sold out of skis every year.
And then you grew really quickly where from 2002 starting your shop, is it around 2007, 2008? You moved to a bigger space that was maybe 6 times, 7 times the size of the original.
Yeah, that one wasn't the issue because we had outgrown that shop for sure. So we had to move. We moved into an 8,000 square feet space versus the 1,004. But that 1,004 was like, was everything was jam packed in there.
Yeah,
It
but I
wasn't
mean, it's a good testimony of success of a starting business. If inside 5 years you move to a space that's, what is it?
inside through. Yeah, inside 2 years and a half. But yeah,
Two
yeah.
years and a half. I thought it took longer.
No, 2002, and we moved there, I think 2005, that summer 2000. So we started basically beginning 2002, sorry, at the end of 2002, November, and we moved to that shop in June 2006. So yeah, pretty much, I guess, 4 years, I guess. But we were in the building for, um, I think we were, there's some good things with that. There's some negative things. It almost grew too fast that we didn't have time to learn from our mistakes, or we hadn't had enough lessons yet to teach us how to do business better. I
Yeah.
don't like that term, but like there was a lot of loose parts, a lot of loose parts.
For a young entrepreneur in 2023, what's some lessons that you've learned of like starting a business and growing it? You know, if you look back on the first couple of years, I know you could you could maybe write a book with all the experiences you've
No,
had, but
well, yes and no, meaning that any business will have its own path, you know, and
yeah,
or every person will have its own path. And what happened with us is that we had instantaneous success,
yeah,
and that caused us to maybe not care enough about where the money went back
hmm,
in those days, meaning that sky was the limit.
yeah,
We could put access on anything, it would sell in the store. Whatever brand we think we would sell well, we bring in, it would sell in the store.
mm,
So for us, sky was a limit, and there was no limit, which was a huge problem, right? Not locally where we moved to that new shop, but mostly where we opened up too many shops at the same time within a certain region without analyzing the local market.
yeah,
Underfinanced, under business educated, because I had a business engineering degree, right? And I mean,
yeah.
under guided probably. Everybody was pretty much on the same note, meaning that, well, oh yeah, well, the sky's the limit. You know, you've got, you know, le vent des voiles, like they say in French. Like,
Yeah.
you've got so much momentum. Don't stop that momentum. Well, no, at a certain point, you gotta.
How did they say? Is it strike while the iron is hot? Something like that.
Yeah, well, you don't want to strike it too hard
Yeah.
because you're gonna lose some pieces, and that's
Yeah.
what happened.
Yeah. So basically, give us some context, 'cause I know a bit of that story, but for people who are not familiar, you start in 2002, you grow the shop to moving to a space really quickly, you're having a lot of success, and then you're like, "What if we open other accesses?"
Well, yeah, so it wasn't that way. It was
Tell me.
everybody wanted a piece of it. So everybody wanted a franchise.
Mm,
So when friends would approach us, we'd say, "Well, yeah, I mean, you're a good friend. Sure, have a franchise. Here we go. You know, write down a rough contract on this, you know, but nothing official really, or nothing. We wouldn't really study the place where they'd want to open, and study the market there, or ask them for, well, okay, well, how are you going to back that shop in the long run, you know, or, you know, a lot of loose pieces, a lot of loose, so things didn't mostly go well on that. So opened the shop. Was it Tremblant or Blainville first? I think it was Blainville, but that was a franchise. Opened up a franchise also in Tremblant. The local hill asked us to kind of co-brand the local little shop at the bottom of the hill.
yeah.
So I mean, for any, you know, businessman that has more experience than us back then, they'd already raise a flag there, meaning that, wait a sec, are you controlling your image? Are you controlling your brand? Because you're branching off in so many different places in the local market.
So what you're saying for people who are not necessarily knowledgeable about the Quebec geography, you opened inside of a very short span of time 4 shop inside of a 60-mile radius.
Exactly. Yeah, even less than that, because 60 kilometers, I guess 40 miles is Montreal. So I'd say probably 25 miles.
Yeah, but let's say
Blainville.
between Blainville and Tremblant, like
Yeah.
the
Okay.
big,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Sure. Okay. Cool.
yeah,
So yeah, so that's close, right? So obviously, the internet wasn't really a factor back then. It was starting. Funny side note: the Shopify, you know, that the biggest platform online that
hmm,
sells, they were snowboard shop owners at the same time that started as us. That
really.
also that also needed a platform to sell online that wasn't available, so they created that platform. So that's where I'm running the parallel here, is that I knew we needed to be online, but we didn't have the tools, and we didn't have the platform to run it on back then. So we focused more on the physical sides of opening shops, and yeah, that didn't. I guess that didn't go. Not it didn't go well. It went well for a bit, but then it kind of, you know, took a wrong turn.
I'll let you share as much or as little as you want, but basically, that's something that from the outside was it was nice to see like the ambition that you guys had because you went from one shop to the peak before you kind of downsized again. Well, how many access shops were there? 7?
There you go. We went up to, let's say, with the online business, because at some point somebody approached us and said, "Well, I want to run the online business." So we kind of treated that as a franchise. Also, we had 9 shops, 9. Yeah. So I mean, Rouen, Val d'Or, Valleyfield, Saint Dorothée, Laval, online, and then all the rest that I mentioned before. And then boom, it imploded. 2000, I guess I'd say 2011. Yeah, around 2010,
Yeah,
right after the kind of the what do they call it in the States?
the
The great,
recession, the
was it the Great Recession? Yeah, 2008 was the Great
yeah,
Recession.
the banking crash or
Thank you. Yeah,
the housing market crash.
exactly. So that was hard for the States. So I kind of thought that it was going to be really hard for us also. Turns out I don't think it was that bad in 2010, because a whole bunch of shops, really managed well through that, through those years. So it wasn't the industry at all. Maybe it slowed down a bit. The growth slowed down, but not like it didn't dip.
Hmm.
So the reason why everything went under is because it was, like I said, you lose control of your brand, lose, and then we used to flow those stores of Axis gear, and then those stores weren't necessarily running their business tight, so they'd pay other product with sales from Axis, so they wouldn't pay us,
Mm.
and so we'd be financing the Axis gear that'd be selling there that we wouldn't have any money for. Plus, they weren't paying us royalties because they didn't have money to pay us royalties. So that didn't go very well, obviously. And then there was 2 corporate shops that we opened up in Laval and Saint Dorothée, and those were just that was probably the biggest mistakes that we made in those days, is that opening up those 2 shops, which was a market that has never worked for snowboarding or skiing or skateboarding. But so many shops have been through there, and none of them have really succeeded.
Yeah, so basically, um, between Montreal and the Laurentians, you go from towns that are really not skiing centric or snow sports centric to you get in the Laurentians, you get to towns that are fully into snow sports. Everyone skis, everyone snowboards. So in that transition, you open 2 stores in Laval, which is Montreal suburb that's really a town of its own, and kind of how would you qualify it? Like, you went into a market that's not, you were testing out if it could work for a snow sports shop.
Good. I guess we biggest mistake. We didn't have that reflection. We just said, "Oh, somebody came up to us, one of our partners there. Oh, I gotta, let's open up in Laval. We've got a space." And then we were like, Schwinn, my partner, was the one on the brakes, and I was like, "No, okay, well, we've got the momentum. Let's go. Let's open."
Because
The
why Laval and not Montreal? Why not the big city?
Good question. I guess it's closer to us. It's not that far away. It's not that, Montreal is pretty much not an unknown, but where would you open a big surface in Montreal?
Good
Like all
question.
those super centers were blowing up, right? And so, okay, let's be part of a super center. That seems to be the trend. And then what happens in those is that it's a money pit. And we see it now that a lot of those spaces are free, or aren't retail spaces, or more like governmental spaces. So yeah, invested in there, underfinanced, understudied, and then yeah, those just kind of went sour, and then that affected also the production of the Axis brand. We didn't have as much cash flow to produce Axis gear,
Yeah.
so that went down. So everything kind of went down slope from there, 2014, and yeah, we imploded back to one shop in Saint-Sauveur, not in the original spot, but like 2 kilometers away, 2 miles away. So
Well, in the same spot that you've been since '06.
since '06, exactly, yeah. And we took back the control of all the online operations, which was also necessary to control our image and to control the inventory. And then finally started back uphill, from about 2016
Until now.
until now. Yeah, we fucking pandemic hit in 2020. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
We'll get to, I want to talk about that, about handling the shop in a pandemic, because I think that's a good subject. But just before then, how how and again, share as little or how much as you're comfortable. again, going back to business lessons and again, inside skiing, inside snow sports, you have 10 years of growth, of success inside uh, a market, aka action sports, that is hard to have success in. You have your growth, and then everything kind of crumbles a bit. You have to downsize. How did that whole situation go? And was there any time where you were like, okay, Access is just going to close off?
Yeah, I guess I should have weighed that option maybe more. So here's the thing: is that being maybe too I wouldn't say cocky, but being too, how do you say in English, fier, quelqu'un
Proud?
qui est fier,
Too much
being
pride?
too much pride to sink the ship.
Mm,
So we should have sunk the ship in 2016, 15, 16, and just pushed the button restart. Because when I look around, there's so many people that have done that and that are still doing very well
hmm
as of we speak of today. And I'm not going to name any names, but that would have probably been a way to do it, which I wouldn't have lost millions of dollars.
mm.
But my pride was too strong, and I said, no, I don't want, and it's going to affect the brand. There's no way. It's like almost accepting a defeat. But sometimes you kind of have to accept that defeat to build better, to rebuild, with stronger foundation. Anyways, we didn't do it. We took the hard way, and I don't regret that. It's just how you learn from it. But like you mentioned, you go from having everything to being, winning an award, North American sports shop of the year, to being like the lowest of lows, where reps don't even call you anymore, or they suppliers just call you to collect and give you shit, and
And that was all backlash from franchisees that were not handling it well.
well, yeah, and our mistakes of also opening shops under financed,
Right.
right? So yeah, so from nice cool dreads in 2002 and being all cool, and in 2015 being all gray haired because of all the stress. At least I'm not losing it, but yeah, a lot of stress that was felt back in those days. But I guess when you always have to go back to the simple things, where family was happy, healthy, I was healthy, stressed out of my mind, but and so that's what kind of got me through it. And you know fucking put your head down and work.
Take me through the plan of you said not sinking the ship and just like going through the storm. What was your red flag that something was coming, and what was your thinking when you downsize, and like what was your process of like going from, okay, what is the red flag and how am I gonna go through that?
Like, there wasn't a master plan, really. It was more like, honestly, just holding on to whatever I could, not to sink.
hmm
So it was juggling with cash flow, you know like, where we really knew we had a hard time was that when we finished the season, where we owed probably more than what we had in inventory. Okay, so when you think about it, let's say you owe, I don't know, $100 to somebody, but you only have $80 to sell, so you're down $20.
Yeah.
So you're screwed, right? If you don't somehow generate money quickly and flip that 80 into, like, double it, double it quickly, then you're screwed. So one thing we knew is that the brand was not completely dead. We still had support from a lot of people, a lot of riders. And what we realized is that a lot of people probably didn't see the difficulties we had in the back end.
hmm
So the brand was still good. It wasn't obviously as strong as on a selling side, meaning that we didn't sell as much Axis gear, but the store itself managed pretty well. So sales weren't really affected in those terms. We were only affected by the lack of inventory in the shop, or the lack of good inventory in the shop. So we knew if we just kind of hung on and did our best to try to turn the inventory as much as possible, and doing smaller buys but better buys, then we might get through it. And that's how we handled it. We just tried to we went from ordering a lot of product back to ordering too little product, not enough to make the numbers enough to pay the bills, but to pay the rent and then the employees.
hmm
So we kind of had to find the perfect balance in those years where we could barely survive, but we make enough just to build a little more and build a little more and build a little more, and that'll probably be the best way to take us into this pandemic, where we were at that point in 2019 where we had built back a little bit, but again, this the curve and the scale was really not fast enough where we could be back to where we should be
Hmm.
in terms of volume.
In 2020, there was a virus of unknown origins that hit. We did.
Let's
We did.
not get in. Yeah, let's not get into
we
that.
we had a couple small talks about it, but every time I saw you at the shop, I was like, "Hey, Scott, how's business going? How are you affected?" And every time you were kind of saying, "Hey, business is booming."
Yeah.
Tell me, how was the pandemic? Because the pandemic for a free skier was, how we saw it is, resorts closed, a lot of events were canceled. You know, it kind of seemed really brim for, is it a word, brim? It seemed kind of dark for a lot of um, different sides of the industry. But the only one that I saw positives was when I was seeing you and you were like, dude, business is booming.
Yeah, I kind of felt bad talking about like the all the positive sides of that, because it wasn't the same for all the businesses. I think I really have a feeling that half the businesses did really bad and half did really good. So when that hit in March, I was like, oh no, here we go again, because we'd already started climbing the hill back up, and I was like, all right, here we go. Somebody fucking hit us, and we're like right at the bottom again, even lower than what we used to be, because all the shops were going to be closed, and because the like you mentioned before, the resorts were going to be closed and everything. So it kind of took us a week to realize that, wait a sec, people are they're buying the same, but they're all buying online.
Mm,
So all the operations costs have gone down, and we're almost selling as much.
mm.
So it took me a week.
Because you don't need all those employees to greet people and
Well, I mean, we needed those employees, but we didn't, I guess, need as many hours as them, or we didn't, we could we could keep the better ones and let
yeah.
the not so good ones, maybe at least the government would take care of them, so we wouldn't feel as bad to let them go. No, I'm joking with that, but because it was pretty much a period where the staff was low anyways in the shop, being that time of the season. So yeah, worried for a week, and then everything kind of picked up, and then we were, I think we were set up online where we had the right building blocks in place, and that really boosted our online sales, and I wouldn't say online sales, but online operations, and it taught us a lot about the online, how where you need to be at to be competitive via the market. And so some people adapted and some didn't, and the ones that didn't adapt online, those are the ones who lost. And I'm not going too far here, but I guess some people will understand what I'm trying to say here, is that the other way around, online success throughout this pandemic, where we're reaching we've already at the end of it, but you also have to scale it back the other way. Now things seem to be going back in store right now and losing momentum online, and people need to adapt. And I think you need to adapt quickly both ways. And it seems like not everybody has the same speed of adaptation, or I don't know how to put it, but
Yeah.
it it seems like we were able to adapt throughout all those different waves.
When we were talking about the whole history of access, you said, at some point sky was the limit, and maybe you were thinking big picture instead of looking at the smaller details. And when you scaled down, you went back to look, handling the micro details of the business. How was it exactly for that period of the pandemic, going from uncertainty, and then, I'm guessing there's a lot of details going into a retail business where it's like there's maybe some acts, in between selling t-shirts and shoes and skateboards and snowboards. There's some products that you need more of. There's some products that sell more there. And then you go into the pandemic where a lot of people, instead of going down south, they want to buy some sporting gear. There's a whole lot of demand that changes, and you got to adapt in a week, or because the whole world comes to a stop, and a lot of the demand is different from one day to another.
Crazy things went on, and are still kind of going on with that. I mean, retailers had a hard time to adapt. Distributors, brands had also a hard time to adapt, meaning that they didn't have zero control on their production anymore.
Hmm.
Everything was mostly coming in from China, and we know what happened there. Production was closed down in certain places. Shipping were also, completely unorganized, not unorganized, but unavailable, let's say,
Yeah.
shipping via boat. So that changed everything. Where people would buy so little, and now they would buy the double, the triple. And then 2021, we ordered a lot, and we got shipped maybe 50% of what we ordered.
Hmm.
And so, like, we're building 2021 to 22, but 2022 to 23, I think a lot of people kind of did the same thing. They kind of bought more than what they really needed, expecting people to be still be spending a lot of money, and expecting the brands not to be delivering as much as they did. But all the suppliers and brands ended up um, uh, delivering everything that was booked, but not on time. So it's kind of like a curveball again in the industry right now, where there's a lot of overstock
Hmm.
that was shipped late during the season.
It's a lot of puzzles that you got to deal with.
Every year it's a new puzzle. So yeah, it's a lot of, but that's business. I'm pretty sure that's business. I'm pretty sure it's not only towards our action sports industry. Obviously, the our industry is basically, in my opinion, built on, let's put it simply like this, on fun. It's supposed to be fun, right?
Yeah.
So, and let's say sometimes maybe people aren't as serious as they should be, or aren't as punctual as they should be, or aren't as focused as they should be. And that's the good and the bad part of it, is that sometimes, yeah, sometimes, a lot of times, things just don't get done as quickly as what they should in other industries, and we kind of lag.
Yeah. As a whole, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the whole, yeah, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we were kind of, yeah. Sometimes we don't react as fast as what we should, and by the time we do react, I mean, sale is shipped.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that, but I'm just, not everybody's the same way, but yeah. So it's different struggles for sure. We have, I guess, when we do hit puzzles like that, our industry gets affected a little more
Hmm.
because of our nonchalance.
One thing that I'm curious to have your thoughts on is how did your sales and the types of product you sell change during the pandemic? Because um, the example I gave a couple times in other episodes is from one season to another, I had friends that weren't into skiing at all that were buying like brand new touring gear. There was an huge increase in demand for locally done snow sport activities, let's say. And I'm guessing that that's been the case in Quebec, but that must have been like all across the world, almost like everyone, instead of going to their trip in Italy, they're stuck at home. So it's like, okay, what am I going to do?
I think we're getting the better end out of this part, meaning that they're stuck locally. I mean, for the worst season, I think we're stuck within our country, right?
Yeah.
So being stuck within our country, there's still a lot of nice skiing and snowboarding to get done.
Hmm. No,
You know,
that's what I mean.
if
How did that
Yeah, yeah,
affect
yeah,
the?
100% positive. Now, what we need to see in the future is that how many of those people will stick to it.
Hmm.
And what I've been hearing from the mountain bike side, which has like 6 months in advance from us, is that most of the people are still sticking, because once you've done it, and I mean, once you've gone touring once, or once you've gone, mountain biking, what one thing is for sure is that the whole freestyle scene, the whole park scene, let's call it the park scene, that has not changed and will probably not change. Kids will be kids, and you give them rails and jumps, they'll be there.
Hmm.
You put a hot map on a ski hill, the hot maps they have on the internet, and then they kind of evaluate where the most traffic is. So if you, let's say, you put a camera that could identify like where the most solicited part of the mountain would be, 100% would be the park all the time, like times 10 of all the other runs, right? So that part of the business is really healthy. I don't think it brought in that many more people because it was already, a lot of people there. But like you've mentioned before, all the touring or I guess free ride aspect that got boosted quite a bit. Now the thing is that will those people keep on doing it? That's a good question, but it seems like they didn't lose that much in mountain biking. I don't think we'll be losing as much in skiing and snowboarding, but obviously those kind of people don't buy brand new pairs of skis every season, so that might be a challenge in terms of keeping numbers correct.
Future will tell. It'll take a couple years to know.
It will, but at least it got more people out. It got more people involved in our sports, and it got more people to fall in love with our sport, which is, in my opinion, 100% positive. Let's talk about this positives because there's so many negatives about this whole pandemic that let's just stick on the positive.
How is the evolution of retail um, for a ski shop been? Meaning that there's been we've talked about it just a bit, but the evolution of online sales in a world where for many people, as much as there are people buying skis online nowadays, there's also a lot of people that want to touch it and feel it. And you're kind of in that in between where you have your actual ski shop, but you also have an online shop. How has that whole transition been for uh you know, old brick and mortar shop?
I think like anybody like any business has to adapt. So I think we should learn to adapt and not necessarily forget older ways of doing things. Like brick and mortar aren't out by any means.
Hmm.
So I think if you can just juggle in between both and find the right tuning, because every business, even within its own competition, has their own perfect tuning, and you just have to find that tuning and that good spot. And once you do find the variables, then I think you're good. But yeah, you definitely have to adapt quickly.
Because I think what you said is interesting. Because let's say from a clothing perspective, outside of snow sports, to me it seems like the brick and mortar is kind of dying. You go to shopping malls and there's a lot of empty shops. There's a lot of shops that are closing, as if online sales are really the way now. But again, going back to snow sports and action sports, it is still alive and well.
I'm touching wood right now, but we're at the bottom of the hill, so there will always be a need for us to be there, meaning that people will forget their goggles or gloves or whatever. People will have problems with their equipment, or people will just come in to chat to see what the new, skis are now, what the new technologies are. Now, if we don't adapt to sell to them what they need, then that's our own fault. That's not the internet's fault. That's not, whoever's doing whatever. People have to see value when they're going to buy from our shop. So we just need to offer that proper value and offer the things they need, or else they just won't buy it here. So we need to adapt, and if you don't, then don't complain. you know
Well said.
don't complain, meaning the internet is, yeah, sure, the internet's no good, but I mean, there's always, you can be part of it, or you can just
Yeah.
complain and have it pass you.
You can ride the wave or trying to swim against it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned it uh, at the beginning of the episode when you were talking about starting your shop and wanting to promote the sport, wanting to promote the athletes. That's a big point that I wanted to touch on with Axis, because you have been promoting the sport, I'd say, in relation to your capacity, because you're not Red Bull, as much as any other brands I've seen inside of skiing. So, aside from a question, big shout out to you guys for what you've done in the past 20 years. And maybe what we can start touching on is, the implication you've had, because from the athletes you've supported to the film projects to the events, um, you guys have, if you have to do a listing of the Quebec culture, the East Coast culture of freestyle, it always links back to you. You guys are behind that all the way through in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I guess it's not we didn't think about it. It's just for us, it was like always part of our life. I think it's important to be part of your life. And that's, I think that's probably got us through all the harder parts. Is that people, I think, do realize, and they understand that we live for this. This is what drives us. This is what always has, always probably will. Obviously, we're getting older now, so every event we do, we're a little more tired at the end. But but we love doing it. We love doing it, and it's. I get the feeling is that if we weren't going to do it, who would? I don't want a snowboarding or skiing event being organized by somebody that has no part of the industry. I want to make sure that people that do organize those events know what's going on, know what to promote, know what brands to promote, know what athletes to promote, and not run a circus show. So I we love doing it, but we also kind of feel the responsibility of keeping on doing it to make sure it's done right. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't want to pass the torch. I mean, anybody listening, all the kids there, if you want to run events, come see me, man. You can run away with a few. But yeah, I, I I hope we'll never stop doing it because that's what keeps us, keeps us in it. It's what keeps us young. What keeps the local industry and regional industry going, in my opinion.
That's very well said. And I think what's cool, and maybe that what did your success is you weren't looking at it from an accountant point of view,
Oh,
saying like,
zero.
oh, we're putting that amount of time and money into that event. Because it feels like for a lot of brands or hills or resorts, whatever, they look at it from an accountant point of view and sometimes lose touch of the intangibles. And that's something that helped you guys a lot is you looked at it just from a passion point of view, but with all those things that you put together, that's what created the Axis brand and made your success.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. That's not really, I guess, it wouldn't be a proper business way to look at it. And I do understand that now. So there's obviously some finances you have to look at when you're putting on an event, maybe that we wouldn't look at before. Some evaluations that, anyways, that have to be done. But yeah, I don't think we should never see it as a business of putting on an event to be making money. If anything, we should hope to break even. But I say that with all due respect, with other people that have put on good events in the past, some of them that don't exist anymore, that have kind of turned it into a business, and that have also kept the integrity of the culture. And I don't take anything away from that, because if they can squeeze some money out of big corporations, let's you'll understand where I'm going with this, with Videotron, let's say,
Yeah.
and make their event worthwhile. 100%. Lift my hat off to them. I wish they could do it again.
Mhm. We're talking about the shakedown.
Well, I don't want to throw out names, but
No,
I
no,
mean,
just for people's sake, because it was a slope style snowboarding event that was held in Saint-Sauveur for 15 years, maybe in the from the
yeah,
early 2000s to the mid 2010s, and it was as mainstream as an event as I ever seen in Quebec, where you had people driving from Montreal to Saint-Sauveur, and the town was filled with tens of thousands of people to see a snowboarding event, which is a feat in itself that I've never seen anywhere else in our East Coast world.
yeah, yeah. So I lift my hat off to those guys, Pat and Brendan, and they kind of turned it into a business where they didn't, they were, and that's fine because they did it so well that, I mean, we need more contests like that.
Mm,
But we never took events in the same way, or we didn't have, I guess, the maturity or the time or the skills to approach it the same way.
mhm. Well, because you were a ski shop putting on events and not necessarily an event production company.
Yeah, but they kind of started off as the Empire Shakedown, and then the two,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Pat and Brendan, kind of phased off into their own business of creating that event, which turned out well.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's funny because I had a talk with them during the pandemic, and we touched back on the shakedown, and I kind of asked them, well, guys, when are you going to be doing the skiing side of the shakedown? Because that's all you'd hear, right? All the skiers saying, well, why is there a shakedown for skiing? And those guys were really, rooted into snowboarding, and I respect that. And they were like, well, maybe you should organize it, Scott. I'm like, nah, I'll keep on doing what I'm doing. But yeah.
I really want to touch on a lot of events you've done and have your thoughts on where it comes from, your memories from it, and to give people a perspective on all that's done. Because and I think it should be kind of rapid fire because or there's so much to talk with you that I think we'd still be sitting down tonight.
Yeah.
But it's great to like go back and talk about everything you've done. So you've been implicated with the local hill, Saint-Sauveur, for since your inception. You've been doing events with them, and Saint-Sauveur has a water park in the summer, which um, anyone in that area knows well, and it's loved. Everyone has great memories from there. And for years, when people would say, "Oh, it's not worth it to do an event during the summer. People are not into snow sports during the summer." You put in rail jams at the water park in between like the water slides for snowboarding and skiing for years. Tell me about that.
All right, I'm not going to take too much credit on that, right? Because credit. I mean, credit has to be given where credit is due. Is that Saint-Sauveur approached that was Sommet? They call it back then. It was Mont Saint-Sauveur, but Sommet approached Dutch with that product. They used to run the what did they call it? The Folie sur Neige, right? Which is was a ski hill. You had to dress up. It was like a course that you jump in the water, right?
Yeah.
So that would touch anybody that would kind of it wouldn't touch like the freestyle side of the whole industry, right? Like
Hmm.
kids didn't care about dressing up and jumping in the water, but then they knew they had to kind of adapt. So they proposed to us one year, I think it was 2004, to have that in on the hill, like you mentioned, and have two rails. And then that took off. And then the next year is like beside the wave pool, and there's videos on there on YouTube where you can see the junkyard jib, which
Yeah.
was the name of the event. I think that was the best year. And yeah, there's a whole the rail line set up with a few hits, few bonks.
When you're a teen and you're into, skiing, snowboarding, whatever, you're just craving for those events, and it was so cool for you guys to put it on because everyone from the Quebec community was going there, swimsuit on, but also with the like long tees or whatever, tall tees, and it when you look back at that, it's like once it's done, you're like, no shit, it was a success. It's like everyone's craving for that, but you still have to. It's a lot of effort to put a rail course in the middle of the summer when it's 30 degrees Celsius.
Well, here's the thing. Like I mentioned before, I think you have to give credit where credit is due. Where Saint Sauveur had the vision of having that event and hosting a whole bunch of fucking teenagers that don't pick up or they font le bordel or they really
Yeah.
they're not very respectable of their environment. So they accepted us, and plus we had all the beer money for Coors Light, where they invested heavily into action sports,
Mm,
and they just paid for everything. Because when you look at it at a business point of view, once again, there's no way you can make that event profitable. No way, zero. Like you're going to charge $500 per person to make that to compete in that event.
yeah.
Like just the snow, I think would cost like 15,000 just to have like the snow chip there, and that doesn't that's not like all the mechanics that come with it, meaning that you needed lifts and shovel, not shovels, but
Cat.
well, not cats, because I mean it wasn't there wasn't enough snow to have a snow cat, but like all les pelles mécaniques, what do you call them? Shovels, like the mechanical shovels,
Yeah.
right? And all the lifts and all everything to put that snow out. But
Hmm.
I think it comes back once again to Saint Sauveur accepting us, Coors Light putting out that money, and especially the low. I mean, this is another thing we didn't touch on. I think we need to give a lot more thanks and give a lot more credit to all the local riders, but also clients and friends and kids that supported the shop and that have always supported the shop. That every time we hold an event, they come. I mean, 100% bénévole, 100% for free, pick up a shovel and help us put a course on.
Hmm.
And we had a lot of love. I think we give a lot of love out via events or sponsorship or good gear or goodies or whatever, but we get a lot of love also from that and from those local,
Hmm.
kids and supporters.
And I'd say that's a good point that you're touching on because I've seen love shown to Axis more than any other brands I've seen in my life. But also, to your point, you're giving a lot more love than any other brand I've seen. So it's a good virtuous circle that you've created with your shop where people are stoked to rep the shop they're sponsored by more than any other people I've seen because they're also getting more love than any other people by their own shop. Or it's a
Yeah, yeah,
it's a family thing that you've built where like you give back, so then people want to give back, and it just keeps on kind of
yeah,
growing.
yeah. Hopefully we can keep it that way. So yeah, that's what we keep. And then yeah, and then the A camp was running also at the same time, pretty much 2008, I think, which is another crazy one.
To put people in context again, for East Coasters, what's the solution in the summer if you want to ski? You go to Whistler or you go to Hood. It's pricey. It's not for, not everyone gets to go there. And you guys came up with the crazy idea of what if we had something like that in Quebec?
Again, I'm not going to take the credit for it because it wasn't Axis that came up with it,
Again,
but
tell
we
me
did
the story
support it.
because you were involved in it in some way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there was the first idea was Max Brochu. He used to work for the shop, or he worked at the shop back then, and he had the idea of putting a whole bunch of snow together with snow cats and putting hay over it to conserve it for at least 2 months after the winter season had ended, and then to put it out and to have a small park during the summer at the end of June. And so everybody thought he was crazy, right? So he kind of put the hay. He need to say who he did it with, but he kind of put that hay on that snow, like almost like 500 haystacks by himself that spring just to conserve the snow. And everybody, well, no, it's gonna melt, and you're doing that for nothing, and you just wasted your time and money and blah 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 blah.
So it was just a theory, like, oh, I think it could work.
Exactly, good old fashioned hay on the snow, and we'll keep it like they did the refrigerators back in the days, right?
Yeah.
So and it worked, and then they had like a 40-foot jump, I think, that first summer, and also rails. So instant success, but once again, um, not an easy business to make profitable because it costs so much to put in that snow together and to build that huge mountain that's like 10 stories high of snow and putting hay over it. That also costs money and labor. And afterwards, putting out that snow and bulling it out to have a flat course to put some rails on or jumps. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So again, not necessarily something that's profitable at all, just something done by people who love it and want to give back and are passionate.
100% passion, 100% passion. And yeah, yeah, and they've kind of we kind of took that torch in between where Max didn't do it anymore. We kind of did it, but it was pretty heavy for the shop to absorb that in terms of time and time and quality. Put the just energy put towards that, and then Dave Fournier took it now and is running it for like 4 years, and he's doing a super good job.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And after a hiatus of pandemic, it's coming back this summer.
coming back this summer. Yeah, yeah. Only place where you can ride this summer on the northern East Coast.
That's sick.
Yeah, pretty good.
I'll
Pretty
have to
good
go do some laps this summer.
for sure.
Um, then another rail jam that I wanted to touch on again to give flowers to you guys because you've put on things that are insane and that takes a lot of effort, as we just said many times, but also some crazy ideas. One of the sickest rail jam that doesn't exist anymore that you need to put back. I'm kidding, but that was super fun and original. It was the Texas Hold'em.
Dude, we want to bring it back so much.
it's it
So
it
much.
was an early season rail jam, so it kind of started the season for the whole Quebec scene. And the whole concept behind it was there was, maybe I'm wrong or maybe it evolved. I'll let you correct me, but there was qualifiers as a normal rail jam. But once you got into finals, it was kind of a poker game where everyone had chips and would bet on their tricks. And
Yeah, so it started off where it was only invite, only snowboarding, only invite, and then we got a whole bunch of shit from Remo.
from Frank
So many
Raymond.
Frank Remo. No, but a whole bunch of the whole skiers were like, "Hey, what the hell? Why are you holding this event? I mean, aren't you selling both ski and snowboarding? You should have also." So we kind of, yeah, you guys are right. We should have it for skiing also. So we opened it up for skiing, I think, in 2007, and then by then, so many people wanted to get involved that we did need to do qualifiers to get people. But I think there was pre-qualified riders also that were had like a pass and invite. And yeah, so the final table would be people would start off with $200 of chips, and we had special Axis chips made, which I still have that I found the other day. And then they would bet on a trick, and that so everybody would hide their trick, write down a trick, hide it on a card, and then when you're at the top of that hill, you have to do that. So everybody would bet, but not knowing what other tricks people had called, and every person had to do their own tricks that they'd written on the card, and then the person that would do it the best would win that pot. And then we go till there's no more money, and so I guess 8 riders times 200 would give us 1,006. We'd split up and whatever.
That's such a sick concept. I remember it was a bit hard to follow for a viewer on the outside because you were not necessarily seeing the details, but just as a concept and for the riders, I think it was one of the more beloved events. The more you get into a specific concept, the harder it is to actually pull it out
Yeah.
and get something that's
But to touch on this, I think we've always created events uh, first and foremost for the riders and not the spectators. So again, I'm not sure if that's a proper way to do it in terms of a business strategy, but in terms of a credibility and long term, I think it's better that way, because if you get approval from the riders, usually the rest will follow. If you don't get approval, if you get disapproval from the riders, you're risking a lot more.
You were talking about doing things for the athletes again. Nowadays, we see less and less independent events, let's say. It's mostly like FIS related events, national events, provincial events, whatever. For the event, I don't think it exists anymore, but it ran for almost 20 years. The Axis Slopestyle was a slopestyle event put on by you guys that was skiing and snowboarding. Ran really well. That was pretty much the best and biggest slopestyle event in Quebec, at least. Or, some would go as far as the East Coast, but let's say in Quebec, definitely. I'm guessing the inception, it starts at a point where you're like, oh, hey, slopestyle would be cool. There's no slopestyle events. Let's do one.
That's exactly it. So we had a crazy idea of holding a slopestyle, but from top to bottom of that run, which had about, I'd say, 10 different modules,
Yeah.
rails, and mix of rails, and we thought, well, yeah, that's going to run no problem. Opened up the snowboarding and skiing inscriptions, and had like 220 people sign up, right? So you're trying to qualify on 10 different modules, 220 people. Like the task was just it wasn't even doable. It was crazy.
Yeah. And was that on the first year or that was after a couple of years?
First year, but then we kind of didn't learn fast enough. But that was the first year, which was fucking just crazy nuts. We had the wall right at the bottom. I don't know if you remember, which was also something kind of new in a course
Yeah.
in 2002. And I remember we didn't get the judging right at all on the skiing and snowboarding. I remember, I think it was GF Ul that really got robbed there. Like there's a few people that got robbed just because we didn't have the judges weren't set up in the right place with the right tabulations, with the right system. The system wasn't in place yet. We didn't know how to operate it really. We were just kind of winging it off.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unfortunate. So my apologies to anybody who got underjudged in that contest. And I do remember some commotion at the end because there was still some dollars involved, and as much as dollars were also involved, there was kind of recognition to be had there. I mean, if you would win the slope style back then, we kind of put your stamp on the regional, provincial not market, but stage. So we kind of got better with it throughout the years, and then it seems like, and it's like a lot of major top athletes went through that, B Dog was in there, Belmar, Bémil, Bergeron was there,
Yeah.
Hull did it, Adams, well, Nicky Adams back then was, maybe more known than right now, but and on the snowboarding side also, I mean, you got, Laurie Blouin, Toutan went in through there, Parot, they all went through that contest. So that's kind of cool to see now that like a lot of those athletes have gotten really high up in the sports,
Hmm.
the highest levels.
Yeah, pretty much every Quebec pro that's been out in the last 15 years has either been directly supported by you guys or benefited from events that you've put on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't. Not that I don't like to see it that way, but we benefited more from them being there than they did from us. So it's kind of like a
Yeah,
yeah,
but I mean, it's mutually beneficial. But
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
if
guess.
when you look back at it, like let's say Emil, before winning a medal at X Games, eventually had to make his steps, and a lot of that was through Axis Slopestyle and Taxis Hold'em. I remember like there was big names: Alexi Godbout, Alex Belmar, Dom Laporte
The
doing the
booth.
Taxis
Yeah,
Hold'em, and there was small, tiny Emil that was 3 feet tall. The rail was higher than him, and he made finals. And it's awesome for kids to have those stages where they can shine, they can make a name for themselves because you don't get from nobody to X Games gold in one step. You need those steps. And it's awesome that you guys made them happen because that's a great example. Emil went from a small kid that was really good, that was inspired by his big bro, and he eventually won an X Games medal. But in that meantime, I remember young Emil going to Access Comps and impressing everyone.
yeah, yeah. If I was small back then, eh? With his long, long, long tee,
That
tall, tall, tall tee.
I remember Emil smaller than the rail and like having to jump for his life to get the lip to. And it wasn't the best looking, but everyone was just so hyped because that kid was 12 years old, 11,
Yeah,
whatever. And
yeah,
it was so sick to see him. And he was competing against like Godbout, who was a pro at that time.
yeah, yeah. Good booth. It's still running, really running, still running good. OS.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that slopestyle. Unfortunately, what happened is that it seems like the demographic kind of got older. So we kind of got the initial part of that because if you look at the demographic of ages and the number of people in that category, it seems like they kind of got older with that event, and then we kind of transferred over to the junior games, which would be the next demography of kids, the next I guess pool of kids that would follow in that contest. And right now, that's what we're still in.
So you rebranded it kind of from a pro event, quote unquote, back in the days where it was like, we're looking for the best of the best, come and fight for the cash, to today the junior games, which is kind of a slope style event for young kids to get introduced to the sport.
Exactly. So I think the kids are kind of back to that. I think the demography and the way the cycle is made is that I think we'll be seeing maybe more and more of higher level contests because kids are getting the pool of kids in that category is getting bigger and bigger.
And I think it says a lot about the sport that you're actually able, or that of the road that has been done for free skiing and snowboarding, where versus 20 years ago, where when you started access slope style, it's not as if you could have even had a comp for 10, 12, 13 year olds because there wasn't enough. The sport was still new, and nowadays you're able to do a full comp with the junior games because the sports have grown so much that there's actual hundreds of kids that want to do a slope style comps, and they're 9 years old, or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. This has changed a lot. I mean, back in 2002, we didn't have the Olympics. Now we have the Olympics, so that has also changed a lot, for better or for worse.
well, what's your perspective on that as a passionate of the sport, but also as a businessman, someone who puts on events? What's the positive and negatives that you see from that?
I don't know. I guess I always flip opinions on that maybe too much to talk about it because sometimes I see it as like the best thing and sometimes it's the worst thing, and so I guess I'm just too much old school to express maybe anything.
But I mean, on a local level, let's say, because as much as you have your hand on a global level, you deal with brands around the world, and you understand the global market. How have you seen it evolve in on a local scale?
Well, obviously, I mean, more people are in the sport. There's more credibility of the sport, get more attention. But then again, you get people in the sport for the wrong reasons, not necessarily because they want to have fun riding skis or snowboards. They want to get into it to have the scholarship or have the Olympic medal, you know? What's more important, the Olympic medal or the feeling you get on a jump? That's a good question to be asked. To, I mean, everybody will have a different opinion on this one, but
It forces a lot of athletes these days, I think, to consider that, saying like, do you want to go down the road? Because comps are so demanding, schedule wise, that with all the comps and the trainings and the level you got to maintain to do your runs at the highest level, that it really requires the skiers to ask themselves that question. Because if you're going on in the comp route, it's you're sacrificing a lot of other things, whereas let's say in the Tanner all days, he could do competitions, but he would also have 3 months or maybe two, whatever, enough time to go in Alaska, enough time to do other things. But right now it's so demanding that it asks the rider, like, do you really want to go that route? Because if you go down that route, there's other fun side of the sport that you're not going to get to do.
yeah, exactly. No, and I think that's what people need to keep in perspective is make sure you're enjoying what you're doing, because if you're only doing it to get to a certain point and you're not enjoying the process, then I'd get out of there. You know.
We touched on it quickly, but I want to state the point. You've supported a lot of athletes through the days, from, as you've said, Philou Poirier and some legends of the sport to in the 2000s slash 2010s, guys like Godbout, guys like Phil Casabon, guys like Frank Raymond, until Dom Laporte, Belmar, a lot of names. And same goes on the snowboarding side. Maybe I'd have some harder time listing them, but it goes both ways. Tell me about the importance you've put or you feel the athletes have to like represent a shop and vice versa, but also what, as someone who sponsored athletes for 20 years, what makes you tick? What has made you choose each and every one of those guys that I've named more special, and they've proved that through the years. But what makes you tick as someone who sponsors skiers that make you say, okay, I want to support that guy?
That's I want to make sure I get this right. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this question. I To be honest with you, it's as if, I guess, we never went out really. I mean, apart from I mean, Poirier or all the bigger athletes back in the days, it seems like we've always supported kids at a younger stage.
Yeah.
And when we see the certain talent coming out of certain kids, certain styles coming out of certain kids that we want to sponsor, it just seems like we're just trying to support them to live their passion, and try to give them the best start, or I guess the right guidance in our industry to make it to the right place.
Is there a thing of helping them like reach their full potential, kind of?
Well, they reach their own potential without us having to. We have no part in that. I mean, the athlete will do that by himself, but
But I mean, there's still a part. If I've seen you support guys and helping them like get to ski to Whistler in the summer, and a lot of things like that, where a couple of those helps go a long way for a kid.
yeah, well, I guess the way we see it is that there's visible. I mean, it gets our brand out there. It speaks. We usually ask for the riders to have at least a sticker or something, wear a piece of Access clothing when they're out there, and that also helps the brand worldwide get recognition and credibility. So, and it gets the rider out there, and I mean, obviously, it's always enjoyable, or even fun to watch somebody from here succeed. Like Matt last year won the Super Unknown, right?
Yeah,
It's fine. So I mean, hell's yeah, man. I want to help out as many kids as win as many contests like that as possible. For sure.
yeah,
But yeah, it's obviously hard to support everybody. But yeah, we do try to hook up the better ones, or
hmm
at least the ones that have with the better mentality, because I think it's really important, where you can have the talent, but if you don't have the right mindset or the right place in the industry, or if you don't have the right actions in the park, you might not be worth sponsoring.
Well, can you elaborate on that? I'm curious on what do you mean with the right mindset. You mean in terms of representing a brand, or just in terms of how you carry yourself?
How you carry yourself, how you expose yourself on either social media, or just via you know
On the hill.
on the hill with just interaction with other riders. Do you want to, you want to be that guy that's always smiling and positive and talking to everybody. You don't want to be that jerk that cuts everybody off and you know always complaining about the jump conditions and rail conditions. And there are a lot of people like that. So yeah, you just want to, I guess, if you're positive, you'll just spread more love, and that's what we want.
Yeah, I feel you on that. There's so much stuff that I'd like to talk to you about, but I feel like it'd almost be good to do a part two at some point in the future because there's always more stuff happening and more stuff to talk about. So maybe it'd be good to close it off with the Patreon questions.
Go
Um,
100%.
Basically, I have the people on Patreon. I tell them my guests coming on, and they tell me question they have for you. So first off, we have Sam Chef who asks, "What's the favorite Axis event that you've put on or that you've sponsored throughout the years?"
Wow, that's a good one. So many of them, and it depends on the year or anything. I guess I'd have to say we mentioned it before. Like the Texas Hold'em was so different and so unique that I guess that would be fun. It would be a little stressful being down the poker table and kind of having to deal with all the 8 different athletes placing bets and writing down it. I mean that would kind of get hectic, but I kind of like that.
Yeah. What was your role? What was your role with that event? In the actual day of the event, were you hands off and letting everything run its course, or were you actually hands on the course?
That's I think that's probably one of my biggest quality or my biggest flaw is being too involved.
Right. So you were at the poker table.
I was the dealer.
Oh
I
shit.
was, yeah, so it was kind of hectic, kind of trying to run an event at the same time of running, like, yeah, the specific part of the event. But yeah, Texas event, I guess Texas Hold'em was cool, but there's so many good events. I mean, and we're still having so many different cool events that throughout the years, I guess they change or you see them differently.
Yeah. Next question is from Holden Baldassi, who asks, "What's the favorite video project you supported throughout the years?"
Whew.
So it could be, the term video project evolved. Back in the days, it was movies, DVDs, whatever. But
Yeah.
what's
So
one that you stands out to you?
So I wouldn't want to because we supported a whole bunch of different movies. Some you've made and some others have made.
Hmm.
I think the most important one that we have supported since day one, and you'd probably agree with this, would be the Summit Challenge.
Yeah.
The Summit Challenge that came, the Coors Light Challenge that came, that was the st-sauveur challenge. That so it wasn't a specific filmer, editor, or writer.
Hmm.
It was the whole event that was a mix up of that. And when we see a lot, the same thing as the contest before, there's a lot of athletes that have gone really, in a high place in this industry
Hmm.
that have passed through that creation
Yeah.
of that video.
Yeah. So again, to give people some context, everyone has seen it, but not everyone is familiar with the concept. It started off as a 3 year, not 3 year, sorry, 3 days that from start to finish of those 3 days, you had to film and edit a full video with writing, but also a storyline or a concept of sorts. And at the end of the 3 days, you had to deliver it, and everyone would watch it and, choose a winner that would win. I think the winner was winning 5 grand. There was 10,000 in total. So it was great cash purse. And it evolved right now to where the timeline is less strict and you have more time to get it done. But it gave and it still gives a great visibility for filmmakers and also writers. And through the years, you've had Dale Talkington from the States that when he was in the come up, he was going there and made crazy videos. And Emile Bergeron, Paul Bergeron, ABM, Belmar, the list goes on of
Vincent
great
Gagné,
Vince Gagne that
Big
made some
Cash.
great videos on their way to where they eventually got in the sport.
Yeah, yeah. So that I think, yeah. So I guess that's it's not a specific project, but it's more like it's an event within that project.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That gave life to the community because um, you have endless classics that came out of there that people are still watching 10 years later from both snowboarding and skiing.
For anybody that's listening to this that's not really familiar with the concept, just go on Google and search either Coors Light Challenge or st-sauveur challenge, and then we'll probably just throughout the
You'll have
algorithm
hundreds of videos to look at.
hundreds, and you'll see. I mean, the writing and just the creative stories that come out of that is just they're
Hmm.
so amazing to watch, and they last throughout the years. You know,
Hmm. So, because the whole point was, again, I've known the original organizer, JF Durocher, and shout out to also the other involved, Guillaume and JP. But basically,
JP. That yeah, I always forget JP, but yeah, shout out to JP, man.
basically, the whole thing is what we were seeing when that contest started was ski porn edits. It's just tricks, and the whole thing was, can you guys create a concept, a story that goes with it, but that is not just some Tupac or Biggie with skiing. Like, can you put a story in that stands out because that's never been seen anywhere else, I think, or almost. And it created some insane stories. People doing Forrest Gump ripoffs, others just creating totally original stories of uh, things that anyone that goes to a hill can relate, like dealing with a ski patrol or there. It's insane what that has created as legacy of
Yeah,
content.
the list is endless, and I think the possibilities also are endless. So yeah, we're hoping to keep that event alive. Maybe we probably will bring it back to a shorter distance, which also was cool for the industry, where it got everybody together in the park for a week or 3 days, like you
Hmm.
mentioned. Working on their project, and then you'd see somebody, well, what are they working on, or why is he dressed up or like that, or why is he taking a shot a certain way,
Hmm.
and nobody would sleep. Everybody would be editing. So yeah, it was a good build up to that final showing of those videos.
Then I have a question from one of your boy, Laurent Olivier Martin, who asks, "Where do you see the future of the shop? What's your vision for the next couple of years?"
Whew. Where do I see the future of the shop? Yeah, that's it's not unfortunate, I guess. You need to embrace and adapt, but yeah, we're lucky enough that our sport is physical, right? So we're not selling video games. Okay, so our sport is physical, meaning that people will always be on the mountain, so there will always be an interaction with real people, and it's so enjoyable to do it that you're not going to be able to say, well, VR is going to replace that feeling you get when you hit a jump or a rail. Zero, never. You can simulate it somehow, but you'll never be able to have the same feeling. So I think in that case, I think we're pretty safe, but we definitely will probably need to adapt where if we do want to keep on doing good business online, everything will be virtual soon. We'll be in the metaverse, and people will be coming in our shop through the fucking metaverse and talking to whoever character and holding the pair of skis and turning it around and seeing it. But yeah, we're laughing, but that's and for the good or for worse, that's where it's going, right? And
The more that technology increases, the more it becomes a split for you guys on the business end, where a kid that's super tech savvy will want to go in the metaverse to check out the Armada, but then someone who's less tech savvy will want to go and talk to a real human and touch the skis. So it's like a big split.
that's where I think you need to let. I mean, that's where I mentioned before. Brick and mortar is really important, but you still need to do this amazing job online. And if you do both of those halfway, then you're not in the game. You have to do. It's just everybody's got to raise their level up, you know, in shop and online. In our part, anyway. So that's where I see it going in a few years. That we're gonna have to it's more work, I guess, more work, making sure we keep those clients happy
Yeah,
and well informed, properly informed.
right.
Because you can pick up that ski boot, right? And you can look at it however you want to, but you'll never be able to try it on, see that proper fit. And that fucking craziness of shipping back and reshipping, that doesn't make sense either. So yeah, I think we will definitely always have a physical location.
Thanks a lot for doing an episode, Scott. I really appreciate it. I think people are gonna really enjoy this episode, and Yeah, man. Long live Axis. Hope you get another 20 years of less roller coaster, still a lot of success.
Hey, roller coasters are part of life, riding the waves. Waves come, waves go, and then you just got to catch the next one. So yeah, we'll be here 20 years from now, and thanks for having me. I hope we didn't bore too many people with the business aspect of this whole thing, but just remember, guys, it's all fun and games. If you're not enjoying yourselves, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, well said. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Scott.
All right, exactly.
So this is it for episode 41 with Scott Reeves. I hope you enjoyed it. Big thanks to the sponsors once again, Planks Clothing, Decans Restaurants, and Access Board Shop. Also, big thanks to the patrons on Patreon. If you want to support the podcast, check it out at patreon.com/the Mayrand Podcast. Peace.